Welcome. My name is Courtney Bryan. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Court Innovation. I want to thank you and thank our speakers today for offering their time and talent. I'd like to first start with a little story. Earlier in my career, I had the privilege of being the director of the Midtown Community Court, the Center for Court Innovation's flagship program. And Midtown's goal is pretty simple, to disrupt the system's approach to low-level offenses by harnessing the power of the community to heal mental illness, trauma, homelessness, unemployment, drug dependence. And when I arrived, one of my priorities was improving our programming for women. We created a new approach to help some of these most marginalized and resilient New Yorkers, provided trauma counseling, immigration and other legal services, emergency food and housing, childcare, job training. But because also the court was located in Midtown Manhattan, we were able to easily forge a great partnership with the Museum of Modern Art. With their help, we built arts and self-expression into the program as well. One day, I met with a group of about 8 women who'd been in our program for quite a while and been working with us over time to find out how we could do better. And I asked what part of their experience had been the most valuable, what had made the difference for them. One woman who was about 50 years old had experienced just unspeakable violence and trauma in her life and would actually sometimes bring flowers to the courthouse, but was now on her feet and working with our staff to forge a new life. She spoke up first. She smiled and immediately said something that has stuck with me ever since. She said going to MoMA was the thing that made the difference. She said, because there I feel like a person, not a problem to solve. Over the past 25 years, the Center for Court Innovation has been achieving real reform on the ground. We are both thinkers and doers, conducting research, testing and implementing on-the-ground solutions and sharing those practices and learnings with others. In New York City, we've played a key role in the campaign to close Rikers Island and have launched dozens of programs that prevent people from going into the system, that reduce incarceration, improve public safety, and enhance public trust in government. For us, the arts have become a critical tool in our work. So, turning to today's program, the eyes of the world are on the American justice system at this moment. Recent months have revealed the painful truth. We have not lived up to our obligation to provide full and equal justice for Black and Brown Americans. Where do we go from here? We are delighted to have you here with us again as we discuss the role that the arts must play in transforming how we create safety, justice, and opportunity for all. While you were in the waiting room, you saw images of art made by participants in the Center for Court Innovation's programs. And I think hopefully saw and heard that the music was written and mixed by youth in our program, specifically our Neighbors in Action program in Brooklyn. So I'd like to kick off today with a little bit more visual inspiration, a short video to acquaint you a bit with how the Center for Court Innovation is using arts to help reimagine the justice system.
In the spring of 2020, despite the many challenges presented due to COVID, participants in the Center for Court Innovation's arts programs wrote and performed songs, writing the music, lyrics, and beats. Others learned graphic design skills, produced and edited videos, and participated in virtual theater workshops through which they shared their personal stories. They shared their hopes and dreams, their grief and their anger. They built friendships, bolstered their confidence, and felt the triumph of overcoming historic challenges to complete innovative, creative projects. Their work reflected the realities of uprisings, social isolation, and inequality. One youth participant wrote this song, The 10 Commandments of COVID, her take on the famous Notorious B.I.G. track.
Number 1, follow rules and always wash your hands. We gon' get it underhand, just keep sticking to the plan. Number 2, don't shake no hands if they approach you. Go wash your hands right away and get some soap too. Number 3, I ain't even playing if you sneeze, if you cough.
Some participants in our programs initially come to the center through the legal system, but many stay on voluntarily. Some join because their friends recommended it. For many, the arts experiences hook them and provide a gateway for civic action and other collaborative educational experiences. At the Center for Court Innovation, community arts programs are designed with a goal of collective and neighborhood development, norm changes, as well as personal and family transformation. Why would a justice reform organization have an art strategies department? After 20 years of experience doing this, we've learned it's effective. We partner with institutions like MoMA, Alvin Ailey, and the Brooklyn Museum, as well as nonprofits such as Groundswell, Young New Yorkers, Recess Arts, and Urban Art Beat, and scores of individual artists who've taught us that if we want people to listen, connect, and reflect, and to grow, we can do it more successfully and meaningfully through the arts. We believe that any complete plan for safety, justice, and equity should contain a robust investment in the arts.
So I am even more excited now for this conversation, and I'd like to turn it over to our host and moderator, Helena Huang. Helena runs the Art for Justice Fund at the Ford Foundation. This fund was established by Agnes Gunn and is dedicated to ending mass incarceration in America by supporting high impact programs in justice and in the arts. But Helena is more than a funder. She's a leader, an advocate, a connector, a champion, an out-of-the-box thinker, and is deeply committed to ensuring those who are closest to the problem are generating solutions. Helena.
Oh, Courtney, thank you. Thank you for the warm introduction. And thank you for your entire team for the incredible framing of this conversation and the extraordinary video. I think it really does get us all reminded just how deeply art centers all of our humanity. And it's a terrific way to kick off what I think is going to be a really exciting and robust conversation. The first of what I understand will be a series of panel conversations that CCI will be undertaking going forward. Just to get, before I make a few more framing remarks and we introduce our terrific panelists, I thought it'd be terrific. We've got, oh my goodness, we have almost 300 people on this call. I want to thank you all for joining us. If you wouldn't mind, maybe in the chat to say a little bit about where you're coming from, geographically, organization that you might be representing. Are you an artist? Are you an activist? Are you both? We would just love to have a sense of kind of the fullness of everybody who is partaking in this conversation today. I'm also supposed to tell you that we can't see you and we can't hear you, but that we will absolutely want to be taking some time for questions and answers. So if you want to start, as questions come up, putting them in the chat, we'll be curating those Q&As in a little bit. Okay, I think I covered all the housekeeping. I just want to say, I think as we all really appreciate that art has the power to change both hearts and minds. And I think that in this historic moment, Courtney was referencing, we are at a historic moment of reckoning in this country, where we are both confronted through the highly visible killing of George Floyd and the global pandemic, which has laid bare our deep, deep structural, racial, and economic inequalities in this country. We are at a moment where we are hungering for new solutions, and clearly the energy that we're seeing in the street, we all share this commitment, and I suspect it's one of the reasons why you are here on this call today. We are all hungering to know, how can we be better and how can we do better once we're on the other side of this, once we're back out in the world again. So good, I'm seeing my terrific panelists are starting to come on, and that's exactly right. We're gonna take on this conversation. We're gonna talk about all the ways in which the moment is right for the kind of thinking that CCI is bringing to the table, really thinking about how arts can be a powerful, powerful tool, as it has been in any social movement in this country, and how can CCI and the rest of us help to integrate arts into all that we do. Let me just say a little bit about Art for Justice. I was asked to say a little bit about Art for Justice, and I think the most important thing there is that we really do believe, and we like to say that it is about bringing artists and activists and people who define themselves as both, along with allied donors, like an Agnes Gunn, who is a giant, together to bring about some of the historic and transformational change that we seek. And I think that, you know, back in 2017, Agnes understood, she was really moved personally by art and by literature, to understand the plight of people who are incarcerated, people whose personal experiences are far from her own as a heiress living on Park Avenue, but it was through art that she was able to begin to bridge those worlds, and did a lot of learning, and decided after seeing Ava DuVernay's 13th that she could no longer abide what was happening in our criminal justice system. And I think of those of you that know the story, she literally, after seeing that documentary, goes home and sells the painting that has hung over her mantle for 25 years. She sells it for an extraordinary amount of money and donates $100 million to start the 5-year fund, which is Art for Justice. And it is really about recognizing the power of artists and activists to come together to create a world that is just and fair and that we all want to live in. And I'm happy to say that Agnes, with her contribution, really challenged her peers and challenged all of us to think about what more can we do? What more can we all do together? And I'm happy to say that there seems to be a real interest in this work, and there is not a week that doesn't go by, and sometimes a day that doesn't go by, when we don't get inquiries from donors, some of them artists themselves, that want to give back and are making contributions, paying forward to create more just and humane, a more just and humane society for all of us. So I want to say, I think there is a trend here. We want to keep that trend going. We want to hear from the experts on this panel about how do we bring this work to scale and sustain it over time. And I just want to add that when we talk about the power of art and the transformational power that it brings, we're talking about it really on 3 levels. We're talking about it in terms of narrative change and really helping to change our culture and think very differently about our responses to poverty and violence and to crime in this country. We're also talking about it on the systems level, and our commissioner, head of probation here in New York City, Anna Bermúdez, will have a lot to say about the work that she's been doing on the systems level. And absolutely, our artists and Amy, all the work that you're doing programmatically to create greater interventions. And then, of course, most and very importantly, on the individual level, the ability for people to see themselves and to act in their own accord. That is one of the most powerful tools that we have, art. And I think many of us who are true believers have seen that time and time again. And we just want to see more of it and to see this good work sustained over time. So with that, I'm going to kick off the panel and invite all 4 of our panelists to speak to this introductory question, and they can share not only a little bit about themselves, each brings their own personal experiences as well as professional experiences to this work and to this moment. And some of them are going to share some slides and other visuals to represent these extraordinary efforts. So the first person is Sophia Dawson. If you could kick us off, the question is, by way of introduction, how are you responding to this particular moment to advance justice through art and art practice? And if you want to describe some specific efforts that you're engaged in. Oh my goodness, that's
sure.
Great. Take it away.
Hi, my name is Sophia Dawson. I just want to start by saying I consider myself to just be God's vessel. I'm a believer, and so all that I do is wrapped up in just really using the gift that I've been given by God to serve other people. That's basically all that Jesus did while he was on the earth. He was serving and ministering to people. Ministry just means to meet the needs of another. I'll share a little bit what I've been doing, honestly, for the last decade, and then I'll talk about what has happened more recently. Some of the slides that you're looking at right now from a project called the To Be Free Project. I'm talking really quickly because I have 2 minutes, which features individuals from the Black Panther and Black Liberation Movement, the original BLM, that are still politically incarcerated for their activism. 10 years ago, I started writing letters to them, visiting them in prison, connecting with their family, using my art, prints of my work to raise funds for their release, etc. By the grace of God, since the project started, about 10 people, 11 people have come home. And yeah, and so that work introduced me to all of the platforms laid out in the Black Panther movement and their agenda as an organization, which also touched on police brutality, which also touched on equal housing, equal education, and a lot of the issues that we're still dealing with 50 plus years later. Not right now, please. And sorry, I have a 10-year-old who I warned to not come and knock on my door. And yeah, and so I've also have a body of work. All of these women in this picture are free now from the MOVE organization, also by God's grace. This is a quilt featuring everyone who still needs to come home. It also introduced me to work on the Black police brutality, as I mentioned. So I have a body of work called Every Mother, which features mothers of victims of police brutality. This is a portrait of Gwen Carr and Leisha Garner, the mother and sister of Eric Garner. The work in the studio turned into a mural, which exists in Newark, New Jersey right now. And yeah, that's kind of like, that's a very, very quick version of what I do. I was introduced to Amy through Project Reset, where I'm one of the co-facilitators at the Brooklyn Museum, which is an early diversion program, which allows people who are arrested for a nonviolent crime to come to the museum, engage in an afternoon of art. We did it virtually since quarantine happened, and then had their arrest sealed and the desk appearance ticket dismissed. And also, I just was commissioned to design the Foley Square Black Lives Matter street mural. So I did the word lives. So whenever you can go and visit it, go and take a look. And there's also 2 other public art murals for the movement that are works in progress, which should be celebrated in the coming days. I think that's probably 2 minutes, but I'm sorry.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. Thank you so much. Next, Commissioner Bermúdez. Same question.
So for me, just as a blanket statement, the arts has to be infused in everything we do in the justice system. So that's the background there. But within probation, I have to put it in context because since 2012, we created offices in the 7 communities where we had high concentrations of people who are on probation, living on probation. Not surprisingly, these are the same 7 communities that overlap with the 1971 prison reentry project that Eddie Ellis did when he was incarcerated, with the exception of Staten Island and the Lower East Side have switched, right? So that tells you something about the entrenchment of, location, within the justice system. So we have offices there that are called NEONs, Neighborhood Opportunity Networks. And those offices, some of which are where we're located in an existing, service center like the Dempsey Center in Harlem, or we've turned our own non-court offices, existing non-court offices that were in those neighborhoods into these opportunity hubs. And so our, signature one, if you will, is in the South Bronx. So the important thing about these NEONs is that everything that happens there is open to the community and to people on probation. There's a couple of programs that are just for people on probation, but for the most part, everything's open to the public. And we have a co-led team of stakeholders that oversee, you know, the decisions about what services are there, what services are not there. It allows people on probation to walk to their probation offices for those who are seen at the neons. And it allows the officers to be able to be in the community and working with someone saying, well, show me that corner where it usually happens that, you know, gets you in trouble, or that it derails you from going to school or to your job or whatever, right? So families can walk over as well and get services as well. So we have a GD program. It's for both people on probation and community members. Each of the neons has what we call a nutrition kitchen, which is a pantry where the community and people on probation can get food. We have clothing closets. We have, you know, ID NYC. We have all sorts of things. And one of our most by now well-known and successful programs is called Neon Arts. And that is a partnership with a public-private partnership with Carnegie Hall. And what happens is that Carnegie Hall is our project manager. The money does not come to probation. It passes through Carnegie Hall onto the stakeholder groups. Then the stakeholder groups, with the money they have, and it varies. So it can be one cycle, everybody can have $25,000, and another cycle people have $5,000, right? Because we just allocate what we have. And then the stakeholder groups hold mini RFPs for the program they're going to choose to have in their community. And what this does is it allows local artists, individual people, to, you know, will be quote unquote competing with Alvin Ailey, let's say, for example. But the thing is that there is a presentation that has to be done. It's not in writing. It's a presentation to the stakeholder groups about, and the crux of it is, what connections do you have to this community? And what can you bring to this community? And frankly, a lot of individual people outdo the big people. And then sometimes folks pick different projects that are, you know, for more geared towards youth, sometimes more geared to seniors. And it just varies. There's 4 cycles a year. And it's an incredible process that equalizes relationships between probation officers and their clients, communities, and it just basically changes a self-perception of who you are as an individual coming from the justice system, of somebody who's seen as a destroyer, if you will, to being a creator, to being an artist, to being a contributor. And it's really honestly wonderful to see every single time. Oh, and then every cycle culminates in a, you know, presentation, in a community presentation at a community setting. And so everybody can then experience what the project was. So I went over my time, but I'm sorry. I had to explain everything. Oops.
Oops. You had a lot to say, and I'm just so thrilled. People are typing in where they're from, and it's just such a great wide array of people from all around the country. So very next, Pastor Isaac, take it away with an intro of you and your work.
I want to first thank all of the organizers for this event, and thank you everybody for tuning in right now. And Anna, thank you for going over your time. I won't feel bad if I do it now. But Isaac Scott, I'm a multimedia visual artist. I say that because my artistry has developed over the years. I started on working with like painting and drawing when I was incarcerated, and that when I came home sort of evolved into a more stricter discipline of, you know, fine art, you know, specifically oil painting, drawing, and then doing graphic design, and then transitioning into media, film and media. So my artistry has sort of taken a growing process over the years. As I mentioned, I'm formerly incarcerated, so I served 9 years in prison. I've been home for about 6 years now. I wish I could see some of the people's faces on here, because some folks have already texted me like, hey, and sent me a screenshot of myself. So I know there's a lot of folks on here that know me, and it's been a long journey. So I appreciate each and every one of y'all. I just wanted to shout y'all out. But the Confined Arts is a program that I created about 2014 it actually started as a series of exhibitions which highlighted the artwork that I had as a formerly incarcerated person, the artwork that I had through a colleague of mine, a bunch of formerly of people who were still incarcerated, their artwork, and also some activist art, some folks who were out here. So we started like just showing our art together, creating a platform for us because there wasn't already a space for us to be able to show our artistry, you know. Having already to deal with the stigma associated with incarceration, we're definitely not getting into any high-level galleries unless we're like that one in a few. So we had to create our own space, and that's what we did with the Confined Arts. And it started off as a series of exhibitions and evolved into a program with the help and leadership of Columbia University and the Center for Justice. So I came into Columbia as a Justice and Education Scholar back in 2015. And since then I've hosted at least I want to say at a national level, at least like we've collaborated with and organized at least about 30 to 40 exhibitions since 2015, 14 that have highlighted the role of the arts in an advocacy point, which brings me to like the Confined Arts itself. It's a platform for currently and formerly incarcerated artists to show their work, but not only that, be able to lift up their voice in a policy-driven and advocacy way. So we have a two-part mission. That mission is to, one, change the narrative about, you know, folks who experience incarceration. So that's changing everything from the language that's associated to them and to the representations of people who are in prison and people who go to jail, people who, you know, are arrested and you see them ugly, filthy mugshots that dehumanize people, everything in its representation that way. But also the second part of the mission of the Confined Arts is to highlight the role of the arts to actually be able to occupy these policy spaces, like Anna said, and be able to change the hearts and minds of people to be able to influence some new policy. So that's our mission, and we do that by building the capacity of the artists that we work with to lift up their own voices to do it. So some concrete things that we've done in response. So we've been responding since COVID-19. Well, we've always been responsive. I just want to say that. Since I've been home, we've been responding. Under my leadership, we've been responding, and the response is no different. The energy and the passion behind the response is no different. I would say the trajectory is a little different as it relates to, you know, a pandemic happening, something none of us could have anticipated. While I could have personally anticipated a lot of what we see with the racial injustices, and we can go there later. The pandemic is not something that we could have anticipated. So we've been very responsive in that respect. One project that we wrapped up earlier this year was the Viral Monologues project that we did with 24-Hour Plays, where we worked with a number of organizations like 24-Hour Plays, Zealous, RAP, the Center for Institutional and Social Change at the Columbia Law School, Broadway Advocacy Coalition, and we brought together, I want to say named artists, that's all I'm going to say, folks who are named. I'm trying to find the right way to say that. We can talk about that too. But we brought them together with playwrights and folks who were, some were in prison, some were formerly incarcerated, and some were actually family members. And they worked together to create these viral monologues. Another project was Open Call for Clemency, which is a visual exhibition project. It's actually up right now. And if you go to opencallforclemency.com, you can see the visual art exhibition. And you can see the 2 panel discussions associated with it, where we brought together speakers from across the country to talk on the issue of clemency. And lastly, the project that we're working on that sort of has my brain all over the place. Tomorrow, we're hosting a town hall event for our post-traumatic prison disorder project event that we're doing. And this speaks specifically to that post-traumatic stress associated with incarceration and trauma related to police brutality and such. So I'll be quiet now. But I wanted to just give everybody some background so everybody on knows who I am. So when I start talking, we're on the same page.
So rich, so much good stuff. If you could make sure that it's in the chat so people can follow up, Pastor Isaac, that would be great. And last but not least, Amy. And it's just such a great opportunity. So eager to know more by way of introduction of how you are now in this position to be able to launch a new art strategy department at CCI and what that bodes for the future of the work.
Yeah, I'm feeling so much gratitude for the panelists and for everyone who has chosen to spend this time here, in part because doing this right now is already helping us with what we're trying to do, which is redirect resources and attention away from things that are failing and dehumanizing people, away from criminalization and punishment, and directing resources towards drivers of safety and drivers of well-being. And so we want people to feel connected and be connected. We want people to feel and be valued. We want there to be opportunities for genuine healing when harm happens. And we want people to have the possibility of economic stability. Those are the things that will make us safe, not isolating, punishing, incarcerating. And so if that's what we want, safety and resources for people, the arts are just unmatched tool for getting to that endpoint. They have so many bonuses. Research tells us, and our lived experience tells us, that it helps on an individual level with our intellectual flexibility, our emotional control, our self-confidence, motivation. We also know from great research that neighborhoods that are more culturally dense and have more cultural institutions and support in their ecosystems are safer and healthier for people. So we know this. And I was very lucky to have spent 17 years working in Central Brooklyn as the director of the Crown Heights Community Mediation Center, which is now called Neighbors in Action and is another one of CCI's demonstration projects. And this is a project designed to center people who've been the most marginalized and failed by the most number of systems in multiple ways. There's lots of language to describe them: out of work, out of school, disconnected, all those things, but they're really people with potential opportunity that we just need to tap in. And once we started using the arts, we had tremendous success. People came to our events, they brought friends to their events, they imagined themselves in different ways. We switched from having town halls that would have, maybe 20 senior citizens who are brought over in a van to a conversation, to spoken word nights that were filled with people and a diverse group of people and could get to nuance. So these lessons learned convinced me that the arts were not just a path to what we want, but it also is a demonstration of the world we want to have and we want to live in. You've seen a couple examples from the video of what's been going on, and Sophia talked about Project Reset, which is a court diversion program. One other that I want to mention is a partnership with Red Hook Community Justice Center and the Red Hook Arts Project. It has a lot of similar components to what Anna was talking about, where we have re-granted funding that we got from the Sigrid Rousing Trust to have a community-driven art process that has resulted in local artists from Red Hook being paid to teach their art to others and to connect their art to the feelings of belonging, civic engagement, and healing and safety. So that is a phenomenal program. And I also just want to mention that we're expanding our idea of what an artist are. Some of those artists are sugar artists working with icing, and they're designing what they want the neighborhood to look like with icing. There's someone who's doing sewing masks and teaching those skills, hair and makeup. So all these ways we really feel like the arts can be embedded into everything we're doing to make safer, just communities.
Terrific. I am ever mindful of time, and there's so much passion and vision and possibility. I think we can all kind of feel it and see it. Let me ask a hard question of maybe just two of our four panelists to keep our conversation moving along. And this is given all the power and possibilities of the arts, what has been some of the biggest barriers to our ability to be able to bring kind of large scale sustainability to this work? Where do we see those big barriers? And I might ask Pastor Isaac to speak to this question first.
Okay, and I'll be quick too. I think I wrote 2 points to this. One is economic sustainability. And when I say that, I really mean that at a grassroots level. A lot of times the funding wave sweeps right over the people who are closest to the problem and who are closest to the people who are doing the work. And the vetting system is not always fair. And in some ways that becomes an economic injustice, especially towards people of color, especially those who can't wear the hat of, I mentioned this before, not being able to wear the hat of program director and artist and artistic director and every other hat that you have to wear for a funder to give you the money that you need. And there's so many loops and holes you got to jump through for $1,000. And every dollar matters, of course, but it's so much and it's so stressful and it's so hard to do the work in a real sustainable way that way. And just with respects to that, I was looking at that there was a lot slashed in that question, interventions, programs, practices, policies sustained, replicated, integrated across systems. And the only common thread that I saw there is not having the right people at the table during the development phases. We have the wrong people at the table talking about how this is going to last for a different demographic of people, right? We have the wrong people at the table. We don't have the people who are closest to the issue, the people who have been not just studying it, but have a sort of a dual or intersecting experience with it. There's not a willingness to bring people to the table outside of their capacity to just make your point. So it's like, hey, I'll bring them in to make this point and then get out of here so I can finish saying what I'm saying, versus bringing a person in to like, hey, what do you think about this? You've been through this, or this in a different way. How can this be better? How can we sustain this? I know we caught the first bit of the wave of the problem, but what's the longevity of it? So we're not asking the right questions to the right people. So I'm gonna be quick and just answer it with that.
That is terrific. And certainly we have heard those critiques, and my hope is that collectively you're seeing more and more responses. But I'm wondering if Commissioner Bermúdez can speak to some of the barriers that you see from your perspective as somebody who's been championing arts for a very long time. What are some of the barriers you see from your constituencies and colleagues who maybe don't yet fully appreciate the power of the arts?
Well, we experience a little bit of a funding issue also from a different perspective, but to your point, Pastor Isaac, that neon arts is really important because of what you just said, that a lot of the funding all of the funding goes to local, artists from the communities, in the communities that we're operating under, but they're not necessarily these big projects. That kind of funding actually is the one that I'm talking about also, because like there's these silos of funding. There's the justice space, there's the art space. And even though we've tried to bring them together, sometimes it's like, well, that sounds more like I can imagine, Amy, your stuff like in diversion. Well, that's more kind of like the criminal justice space, not the art space. Or that, if we want to do neon arts, that's like, what space is that in? We don't know. And there's like a little, we've had to do a lot of work bridging that understanding that it has to go hand in hand, because I think what's happened is that the art space has been seen more as are these art programs to have people who are involved in the system learn how to draw or make this kind of art or that kind of art? And that's not the point. It's both a humanity enhancing process, right? And to bring humanity into this system, to bring a human need of creativity that we all have and needs to be expressed. And, in its most basic element, for example, is having probation officers, which we're doing right now, use art to do part of their case management, right? So if we want to instill hope in somebody, or if we want to get somebody to, sort of see where they're at in their heads, or, I love your expression of the post-traumatic prison disorder, where we have like the post-traumatic, going through Rikers and, which is very similar, and other parts of the system is, so tell me that tell me what you're feeling in a song that reflects what you're going through right now. Or what song do you use to get yourself up every day, right? And then you start from there, right? And so, yeah, you don't need money for that, but I don't think there's an understanding of how the two blend together. And then we can have bigger projects, right? That then there's a showcase, there's a voice to the community. There's the internal voice, there's the external voice. And I just think we haven't done enough to bridge those silos in a way that leads to more blended funding. Then the other piece is like, well, if you give you that money, how much is crime going to be reduced? Is this quid pro quo of every money we invest is one less arrest or one? And that's, that's not fair, because reduction in crime is so complex, that we have to invest time and then these opportunities and resources to have people really, be able to land in a different place than where they started. I hope that answers it.
I want to bring Sophia and Amy into this conversation, and I'm clearly going to blend a couple of questions. Pastor Scott spoke to not the right people at the decision-making table. Commissioner spoke to lack of integrated funding, way too many silos, and the need to be able to demonstrate early on, meet measurements that maybe are not the right measurements for the kind of transformation that we're talking about. I know Sophia and Amy, you probably have a lot to say about what keeps us from creating the kind of scalability that we want and need, as well as what are some of our best arguments to make the case for the transformative power of arts.
I can jump in here. There's one thing I want to add to the barriers question, is that for me as a facilitator, I've been facilitating art classes in a number of nonprofits, including Artistic Noise, Brooklyn Museum, working with Friends of Violence at Rikers. I can't even remember where else. But long story short, I have a bunch of young people who are no longer teenagers, they're now adults. And so the return is something that I think there is not a lot of funding for. There's not a lot of conversation about it. We have a deep investment and interest with young people when they're in their teens, when they're just young adults. But what about when they come home? It's hard for me as a facilitator who builds relationships. I have an unofficial group of alumni that, even right now, the project that I have going on, I have a group of people that I always reach out to and I say, are you available? This is a stipend that's available. I'm constantly asking for additional funding every time someone wants to commission me to do something, because I'm like, well, I have 2 hands and a 10-year-old son. And so I need help. And these are some young people who I've worked with over the years who are well-equipped and fully capable of working with me as assistants. And so, thinking about the return, for young people that are coming out of Rikers that have children that want to stay out of the streets but have a hard time finding employment, what options are available for them? For my elders on the political prisons that have come home, we're talking about people that are coming home in their late 70s, having been locked up 40 plus years, even though they maintain their innocence, coming out with a felony on their record. And we all know all of the things that you are denied once that mark is on you, but we're talking about elders. And so I think that, there needs to be a way to get, yes, we meet in these programs. Yes, we meet in these projects. Yes, we meet in these creative spaces. But what are the basic needs that a young person or an elder needs just to get through the day? And I think that a lot of the funding in arts, there's no money for that. And that's what I need for someone to keep coming to my program. That's what I need for someone to be able to think beyond tomorrow. One of my mentors, Dequi Keone Siddiqui, she defines oppression rather as just getting through the day. And that is where a lot of the people that I've worked with over the years are at. They can only get through, they literally can only think from today till tonight. And we want them to dream. We want them to have these success stories. But how can they get there if all they can do is get through the day? And so I think that that is one of the major barriers that I face personally, and also I've seen all of the people that I've been called to serve through my work also deal with and struggle with.
Well said. Amy, thoughts and comments, and then we might wrap up with one last question to everybody about call to action to the audience before we turn to Q&A. But please speak to both our greatest challenges as well as opportunities.
Yeah, I really think that one of the challenges that we have is a fear from our politicians of funding something that seems soft on crime. And that fear, I want to say, like, it's unsubstantiated. we need an opportunity is to really lift up all the research and evaluations and the studies that show how powerful the arts are in changing people's lives. And you know, there's someone I think of who spent way over a decade incarcerated, and when you ask him what led to your change, he says Shakespeare's sonnets. You know, and there's so many examples like that. I think another challenge is the notion of scalability, because what makes these programs so effective is their localness and being driven from the specific passion and the chemistry of the artist and the community together. That doesn't mean we can't scale up, and it just means that we want to take the principles of the programs and scale those up and leave a lot of room for the artists to make their programming specific to the community that they're serving. Another just community that I want to shout out, and Sophia already did a little bit, but we need programs for adults. It is sometimes easier to get funding for young people, and we need more for young people, but we've seen in our programming, when we have arts programming for adults, they're tremendously affected positively. And I think that that's a population that we have tremendous opportunity.
Great. I'm just looking at some of the Q&As, but and want to encourage people to send them in. Yes, please, Commissioner.
So let me piggyback on what you just said, Amy, because we've had a lot of success with multi-generational, not limiting our neon arts, cycles to just one age group. Sometimes the stakeholders have wanted to do that, other times not. And we have also our neon photography, where we've had 2 generations, a father-son duo who have repaired their relationship through this, avenue of photography and this process, as well as a class in which there were a bunch of like young people with one 80-year-old. And the dynamics there were so spectacular in terms of the intergenerational aspect of that. So we should also think about how we even structure, quote unquote, the population that the program is for. And there's no saying that it has to be always just one age group. Anyway.
There is a question that's actually very spot on with this conversation, and that is there kind of a model program or art intervention that begins to kind of get at some of the scale, a model that we would look to and say, this is what we need much more of?
Is that question open?
Open.
I'm going to say no. There's not one model. I think there's a lot of models.
Good. All right.
Come together, and we can discuss those models and those methods and what works and what wouldn't work in different spaces. Then we can come together with a shared model. But I don't know if we need one model. And I think that's what we need to talk about. Does everything need to be uniform? Can things be a little more flexible? Can it be several models? Maybe we have a model for this. Maybe we have a model for that. So I think as we think about reimagining, we have to even reimagine numbers. reimagine structure, reimagine the boxes that we're thinking and the limits that we're putting on stuff. So that's
I think that's an excellent point. In fairness, I think it was more general, but just like, what are the programs that we want to be kind of amplifying and standing up? As you know, it's always so helpful to have, what are we saying yes to? What is a good
to that point then, Helena, I would say programs that work specifically with directly impacted people, those are definitely models we want to keep, and we want to further perpetuate what Neon Arts is doing and putting the money right in the right people's hands. Programs that do that, programs that address all of the concerns and barriers that Sophia mentioned, I mentioned, Amy mentioned, everyone else mentioned. I think that's the case.
Yeah. And I would add, I echo completely what you just said in terms of we need a continuum, we need a variety, because, you know, the arts are just so amazingly, you know, varied that, and somebody who may be, you know, attracted by music may not be attracted by poetry writing or by, you know, visual arts or whatever. So that's one thing, but also infiltrate, at least from I'm going to put my bureaucrat hat on, you know, infiltrating systems to challenge them. Says, how can you use the arts in what you're already doing?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Take schools, for example, right? The whole thing of like teaching kids to draw or not. So there's not a lot of money, let's say, for art classes, right? And for the arts, but that doesn't mean that teachers, we can work with teachers to have certain ways in which instruction happens that is driven by the arts, by drawing. Even if you are more talented and I can only draw stick figures, we can still communicate via a visual medium, right? And then you don't know what will happen from there. There's some other magic that happens, because I honestly believe that arts creates magic. And so, you know, so those are the kinds of things we should really challenge ourselves about and really infiltrate systems that exist right now. As I said in one of our prep calls, why isn't everybody that walks into prison getting a sketchbook or a book to write or to draw or to whatever, right? And things like that is things that I think we should push ourselves on.
There are a couple of other really good questions. We're not going to get to them all. What I want to do, there's one person just asking if they want to get involved working with young people and art, being an advocate, where would they plug in? And I think that speaks to kind of the final question that we wanted to really sign off with, which is that we know we've got a really diverse, wonderful group audience here that are, you know, can make things happen in their own communities and the systems in which they're working with. Do we have advice, call to action for some, whether they're working in the court system, whether they're a teacher, whether they're an artist, whether a funder? Do you have individual kind of call to actions? And maybe let me start with Sophia. What would you want our audience to take away?
I mean, I have a bunch of call to actions. I'm just going to read them off. But like I mentioned before, I am in the process of developing a cohort, something like a residency, collective, collaborative of all the young people I've worked with in Groundswell, Whitney Museum, Brooklyn Museum, Artistic Noise, young people coming home from Rikers. So if you want to support that initiative in any way, you can reach out and connect to me. I gave my Instagram earlier. It's just I am wet paint on Instagram. That's the best way and fastest way to reach me, unfortunately. I also have a book that I'm working on called Correspondence. And it basically, it has the 10 years of letter correspondence written to me from political prisoners. That book is going to be used as a tool to support the elders that are coming home. Support the arts and support artists, right? So yes, I'm a facilitator. Yes, I love working with young people, but I also have a practice. And so making sure that, you know, when you're connecting with artists and when you're purchasing original work from artists, you're not only buying it at the annual gala at an auction, but that you're actually showing up to our exhibition, supporting our initiatives, because this is what we are bringing into the classroom that is impacting all the young people and hopefully at some point the elders that we also want to see shine and thrive. What else was I gonna say? That might be it. Oh yeah, and if you're funding public art projects and large-scale initiatives and even programs, I'll give the artist creative freedom. That's all I'm saying.
Great. Amy, I'm looking at you. I'm wondering if we have time for any more, or if that, on that note, if that isn't a wonderful place to end.
Yes, because we have a wonderful youth performer also that we want to give her a chance to perform. I do want to say that everyone will get a survey after participating in this, where they can indicate their interest to continue this conversation and provide feedback for the direction. So I see it as my job to talk to as many people as I can and connect and brainstorm and figure out how we can organize together. And that to me feels critically important. And part of the reason for this convening is so that you can know how welcome we are to organize together, so that we can make it possible for every single sector to be using the arts, and to be using the arts to focus on those people who need it most, those people who've been left out. So we have a young person, Nevi Vidal, who during this COVID quarantine worked with a staff member of NIA, Anthony Collins, to write a song that she's going to perform as our closeout. I turn it over to you, Nevi.
Hey, everyone. I'm going to just start. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. 1865 to 1900, right? Was under my minority hero. Light skin, dark skin, Native Americans, Chinese, Mexicans, and African Americans. Other legislators created the black codes, the freemen. Liberties and rights was out the window. That ain't all. Many states had labor contracts, so sign that. If you don't, you're gone to straight confinement. The 14th Amendment, 1868. Full citizenship was granted to former slaves. The KKK was haters by the way, terrorizing, despising, spreading fear and violence. Since 1900, rights was under my minority heroes. 1865 to 1900, rights was under my minority heroes. Light skins, dark skins, Native Americans, Chinese, Mexicans, and African Americans. 1865 to 1900, rights was under my minority hero. Jim Crow laws, a racial separation known as segregation. So watch your location. If you're wifey white, try to fight the temptation. Avoid the confrontation, like back on plantation. Separated schools, railroads, and false too. After separation, stop the complaining. Some wasn't having that. They knew they civil rights boo. On the front of the bus like Rosa Parks. Ooh, 1865 to 1900, rights was under my minority hero. 1865 to 1900, rights was under my minority hero. Light skin, dark skin, Native Americans, Chinese, Mexicans, and African Americans. 1865 to 1900, rights was under my minority heroes. After all, culture is important. Americans wanted natives to be boring. With the Mexicans, they didn't treat them better. They came into America for the better. Hostility towards Mexicans grew. President Hoover, he ain't care, he ain't like them too. Next thing you know, 2 million went back. Man, it's really crazy how Americans act. Oh yeah, since 1900, rights was under my minority heroes. 1865 to 1900, rights was under my minority heroes. Light skin, dark skin, Native Americans, Chinese, Mexicans, and African Americans. 1865 to 1900, rights was under my minority heroes. Thank you.
Love that.
That was phenomenal. Phenomenal. Thank you. And all of you attendees,
Thank you.
say that you got to hear Nivea Vidal first. She wrote this song, she mixed it, she did everything, and she recorded it on her iPhone. So it's phenomenal work. I want to thank everyone for coming. Look out for that survey. We will include links to everything we've referenced and other programs that you might want to learn from, and look forward to knowing you all better in the Art Strategies Department at CCI. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists.